Welcome to the Bernitha Rena Relates Podcast. I'm your host, Bernitha Rena. Listen, there are stories you hear, and then there are stories that humble you. Today's episode is one of those. We'll talk to someone who refused to let go of a dream planted in her heart. Through heartbreak, hope, and the kind of faith that defies odds, my friend Philisha's journey to motherhood will leave you breathless. Let's get into it. Hi, Philisha. Welcome to the Bernitha Rena Relates Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. I appreciate the honor of being able to share your journey to motherhood with our audience. But before we get into all of that, I really want to know about Philisha. What was life like growing up before the thought of having your own family was even a consideration?
Growing up, family was very important to me. Grew up in a very small family. It's my mother, my father, and my sister. And their journey to start a family was pretty difficult. My mother and father were high school sweethearts. They got married young and immediately tried to start a family. My mother had complications during her first pregnancy with my sister, who was 2 years older, had toxemia, had to be hospitalized, and actually she died. My mother died before I was born after having my sister. My father was at work and she flatlined and she floated above her body. She told the story of her floating above her body and seeing herself there. She knew she'd had a baby. She knew my father was at work. And she had the whole experience of going through the tunnel and seeing God. She had a conversation and said she wanted to live. So this happened before I was born. She felt herself being pulled back into her body. She told the story to all the nurses and doctors. I saw you do this. I saw you do that. And they told her, it's a miracle that you're alive. My sister was 3 pounds, 12 ounces. They talked about how they could hold her in their hand because she was so small. And then they told her, you should probably not have any other children. Be a year and a half later, I come along. They found out they were pregnant. My father tells the story. She was going to go get an IUD put in. Of course, when she got pregnant with me, the family was not happy. They were frustrated with the fact of died. And now here's this other baby. And the doctors were saying, you should abort this child because of the complications. We don't expect the child to be this or that or have limbs. She had a vision of a baby girl. And she told them, I saw her and I'm going to have her. And so 7 months into her pregnancy, she had me, 3 pounds, 10 ounces. And that's how we started our family. So I grew up just assuming that having a family is just the next course of action and that it would always be an option. I was very career driven. So you talk about like, who was Philisha?
Yeah.
I grew up musically, so I always had pursuits of music. As I got older, I started a music group, but I was a career person. I was very driven, very determined. I had elevated to different levels in my career, early 20s. And so in my mind, I was just going to be this career woman. I was going to be a very strong executive in business and in finance, and I was going to have it all.
You were this very talented singer. In addition to that, you were this very successful and corporate professional. And then what happened?
Well, my sister started having children, and I saw up close and personal how difficult it was to raise children, when you're raising children alone. Now, we were a very close-knit family, so we were always there. I did see the struggle of having to be the provider, getting frustrated when the baby's colicky or finding daycare, having to go to work, trying to go to school and having a child. So somewhere along the lines, internally, I made a decision that I wanted to have a couple of things that I thought were accomplishments before I even thought to have children. So, I have to have this degree or this position before I even got married. So it was like, I'll get back at it once these things are done.
So, Philisha, it sounds like you were just this really incredible career woman and wonderful singer, and you just had a great life going. What changed your direction?
I definitely wanted a change in my life. I think it started around 23, 24. I did start thinking about a long-term relationship. I'd bought my first home at 24 years old and had gotten a new job. I was relocated to start this new job, bought this new house, and I'm like, I'm going to just do a fresh start. I had met my husband maybe the summer before. Well, he wasn't my husband then, but I'd met him the summer before and things were going great, but I was moving and I thought this just isn't going to work.
he lived pretty far from you
Mhm.
and you didn't think that the relationship would work because of the distance.
Yes. So if you ask him, he will tell you that I gave him an ultimatum, which it wasn't. I was trying to break up with him because I thought we're dating, but this, I don't know how it's going to work. And I was assuming that he wouldn't travel to see me and that we just couldn't keep the relationship up. So I was trying to break it off with him, but it turned into a committed relationship at that point. And at 29, I got a promotional opportunity to come back. At that point, marriage entered the equation and we ended up getting married and buying a home. And, life was good for a short period of time. And shortly after we got married, my mother got ill. She had a stroke and life changed. So
How so?
it changed because it was a debilitating stroke. The doctors told us that she was pretty much going to die. And so my father and I took her to his house and cared for her. She was pretty much in a coma at the time. And she had a trach. She required nurses to come and take care of her. We had to learn to take care of her. And so early in my marriage, again, the focus of starting a family was kind of put on the back burner because I needed to focus in on my mother. And I was going for my master's. I had to put that on hold. Different career aspirations, had to put those things on hold because at this point it was a fight for her life.
Right. So did she go from being a healthy person to this first and only stroke?
Yes.
Wow.
Now, what I will say is right after she had the stroke, she was able to talk and to speak maybe for like a week and a half. And during that time, she would ask me, she said, if you had a child, a girl, what would you name her? And I said, oh, I love the name Riel. And she said, I like that name. If you had a boy, what would you name him? And I said, oh, it would be Rude. And she said, Rude. And she said, I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
I like that. And, we talked about other things, but that came up in the conversation. And I'd be leaning over the rails to help take care of her. And I could just feel heat coming from her hand against the rail towards my stomach. I know she wanted me to be a mom. And I know that she was praying for this, even in the fight for her life. Yeah. So that was the beginning of my marriage. And for 6 years, I helped my father take care of my mother. During that time, I learned so much about life. I learned so much about her sacrifice as a mother. I learned so much about the importance of family, but most importantly, I learned the most valuable lesson that I've learned in my entire life, and that is about faith. I grew up in church. I have a very close relationship with God. I'm a singer. I'm an anointed singer. I feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. I hear from God. So I felt like that was solid. But this really rocked me to my core. And at that point, I kind of questioned God. How could this happen? My mother was up singing at church. When she fell, they were talking about how powerful the service was. You could feel the presence of God and she fell, but she laid too long. And there was a nurse there that said, I think we should get her to the hospital. And that's how they found out that she had a stroke. My mother was a worshiper. Yeah. It was kind of hinting around about things before her stroke. She would say, sometimes I don't always feel so good. I don't say anything to anyone. Back to my conversations with God, I just didn't understand how could this happen.
It happened in church.
It happened in church. And my mother, before they took her to the ambulance, she says, my Bible's on the front row and my offering is in my Bible. Please put my seed in the ground. So she went down fighting. So when this happened, I questioned God. So I wanted to hear from him. I went on a fast. I did have water, but no food. Lord. I need to hear from you, Lord. And I did.
What did he say?
What he said to me, he showed me the scripture of the disappointing vineyard. And I was confused. I'm like, disappointed, and he was letting me know I came back to find faith and I found fear. And I came back to find, that you believe me, but you're doubting me. Do you really believe that I am who I say I am? Even if your situation changes.
Oh my goodness, that just gives me chills.
That I change it not. So I thought at that point, wow, I was convicted. I've been a Christian all my life and here I am questioning God. How could you do this? How could you let this happen? And he let me know that he's sovereign. He's God. He can do anything that he decides to do. And what he expects from me is trust.
Right.
And faith.
Right.
And so we went through this journey, 6 years through this journey.
So you went from being a newlywed to your mother falling ill and you spending the first 6 years of your married life as essentially a nurse.
Yes.
Wow.
A lot of times away from my husband.
What did he communicate to you about you being away, taking care of your mother? I imagine that's a hard thing to say, like, why aren't you here for me?
It was a difficult time. Even at that time, my stepdaughter came to stay with us. We're new in our marriage. I've got a preteen coming to stay and trying to get her in school. And then my mother gets ill and life just happened. Like they say, life really started to life. And I'm trying to work during this time. It was unimaginable. But again, I learned a lot about faith. I learned about trust. I learned about the Bible. I learned how to use the Bible as like a tool.
Right.
I have not seen Jesus Christ physically, but I have watched him do miracles in the hospital with my mother. I know they've probably taken her off of life support 5 times and she lived. She breathed better than she did when she was on life support. They said that she would never open her eyes. And I know this is my fertility story, but it's a big part of the story.
It's a huge part.
And I have a good friend of mine that was in New York. I'd go to New York to kind of get away and do some recording to kind of get my mind off of it. And a good friend of mine was a prayer warrior. And she really taught me how to pray. And she really taught me how to seek God and believe God to do the impossible. And he did so many miracles. And during the time of being out there in New York singing, went to her church and sung at her church, her pastor was praying for me. They were thankful that I came and sung, but he prayed for me. And he told me, you made a vow, an internal vow, and it has blocked some things in your life. And you need to go and undo those vows. And I thought, what did I do?
Why that?
Well, I was a career woman and I saw my dear sister making it look easy when it was hard having these children. She had 3 children and it was difficult, as a single mom, but she made it look easy and she did what she had to do to raise her kids. But in my mind, I saw it as a negative. And I had all these things that I needed to do before I had kids. I set up those blocks.
Been there, done that.
I set up some internal vows that I needed to be this and be that and be this before I would even allow any of these things in my life. And that's what he was addressing, is that I had blocked this flow in my life, this blessing that I now know that I didn't know was a blessing. So I did. I went and I prayed to reverse whatever vow that I had. And during this time, helping take care of my mom and seeing God do some miracles, I decided, well, maybe it's time for us to figure out what we need to do to have a child. By this point, we're like 5-6 years into the marriage and no child. And it's not like we were trying not to have a child, but there was not a baby. So growing up, I had very, very heavy periods, terrible, debilitating cramps. But I felt like this is what women go through. This is womanhood. And I just bore through it. And even before getting married, they were talking about I needed to have a hysterectomy. And before I got married, that's when I found out I had fibroids.
Okay.
I didn't know what that meant, but they were like, you probably need to consider a hysterectomy. I just got married, so there's no way.
They didn't say remove the fibroids. They just said take out your whole uterus?
That's the information that I got.
What is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I started to try to think about having a child, I went to the doctor that said, you can have a child with fibroids.
Yeah.
And so she did a surgery and took out 30 fibroids. But again, let me just back up 1 second.
Yeah.
So getting prepared for the surgery, here I am having a surgery for the first time. My mother's in the hospital in a coma. And I've got to have this surgery. I had never had a surgery before. Of course, you want your mother there.
Of course.
Life was so hard at that time. I just couldn't breathe. So my mom always said, when you get ready to go to the doctor, you need to go make sure you have good, fresh pajamas and freshen up your bag. So I'm sitting outside of Target and I'm getting ready to go in to get all my stuff. And I'm talking to God and I'm just like, I'm just so frustrated. I just want things to change. I want this to be a new beginning. I want it to be like it's my birthday. I'm getting ready to have this surgery. And I almost felt like things are not going to change. I didn't want to wake up from the surgery because life was so hard. I couldn't bear to think that life was this.
Yeah.
So I go into the Target and I'm going down the aisle and I see this lady And she's kind of looking down the aisle at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know her. So I go down the other aisle and she's following me. She's looking, she's waving. And she's like, ma'am, I need to talk to you. And I'm thinking, I don't know what you want to talk to me about. And she says, ma'am, I need to talk to you. Jesus Christ is telling me something about you. He's going to give you a new beginning. It's going to be like it's your birthday.
Oh, Philisha.
And I looked at her and I said, you know Jesus? She says, yes, he's going to give you a new beginning. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. So thanked her and hugged her in the Target. And I got my bag together, went to that hospital the next morning. I couldn't wait to have that surgery because I thought my life is about to change. It's going to be like it's my birthday. God has confirmed some things. And I had the surgery. They took out the 30 fibroids and I hadn't seen my doctor, but the next day, the other lady that was in there with her, the other doctor that was there with her came in. She says, has your doctor been by? I said, no. She says, have you heard anything about your surgery? I said, yeah, they told me it took out 30 fibroids. She said, we weren't able to save your tubes. I was confused. I said, what do you mean? What does this mean? And she says, yeah, there were so many in there. We tried our best to get as many as we could, but we couldn't save your tubes. I couldn't even cry. I was just weeping. What does this mean? Does this mean I'm not going to be able to have any kids? What does this mean? I thought, what kind of cruel joke is this, God? Like, what kind of new beginning is this? And so when I did talk to my doctor, she basically told me that there were so many in there that they had to cut almost through one of the tubes to get to the other fibroid. And that one was severed. The other one was just laying over to the side. And she says, I don't know if it will ever work, but we'll have to wait and see. So she referred me to go talk to a fertility specialist and talk about my options to have a child. So the journey to motherhood at that point started, and it seemed like a very cruel journey. So we emptied out a large portion of our savings in order to get the process started. And God, in his wonderful way of being God, I gave the money. And I got a call from a manager at my job that says, we had an unexpected bonus. And guess what? You're eligible. And so we're going to give you a bonus. I said, wonderful. It was the exact amount that I gave. Yeah. And I got it the day before my birthday.
Oh my goodness. What a beautiful birthday present.
It was a beautiful birthday present.
He kept his promise.
He kept his promise.
Yeah.
And what I love about God is anything that he wants to do in the earth, he will finance it. He doesn't need our money. He needs our faith. He needs our trust. And he needs us to believe that he can do anything he said he can do. So they started the process and first transfer failed. Oh. They put 2 in. I had so many embryos that made it.
Well, that's wonderful.
Which was wonderful. I had lots of eggs, but the delivery system, the route to get there, as they say, the bridge was out. And so the doctor came back and she said, we are the best in the world at what we do. And so I can tell you with all confidence, it's not us, it's you. And so I have no confidence that if we try this again, that this is going to work.
Really?
What do you want us to do? And I looked at her and I said, I want to do this again. And she said, okay, we'll wait for you. I went home and I cried and I cried and I cried because I couldn't believe this.
Right.
I was meant to be a mother. Right. I've helped raise my nieces and nephews. I'm an auntie parent. Okay. Right. I have invested in so many other people's children. And what do you mean it's time for me to have a child? I'm going through all the stuff in my life and I can't have a baby.
Right.
And I refused to eat. My husband was saying, Philisha, just eat something, please, please. So I had a conversation with God and I just finally said, Lord, if you give me a child, I will give this child back to you for your purpose, for your kingdom, for your glory. Yeah. You have to do it.
You have to do it.
They've done everything that they could do. And if you don't do it, it can't be done. And I squared my shoulders and I went back for the second round. And they put 2 babies in. And 2 weeks later, they called to say, you're pregnant.
What?
You're pregnant, which I had already cheated. I had taken a test. I felt something different. I'd taken a test. And for the first time in my life, I saw on the little digital thing, it say pregnant. And I couldn't believe it. And so I was pregnant with twins. Both of the embryos that they put in took. it took.
Did you know at that time when they told you that not only were you pregnant, but you were pregnant with twins?
I figured because
Really?
is it the HSG? It was so high.
It was so high. Okay.
That I figured both of these have taken. So then they called me back to confirm that two
Oh,
of them had taken and I was pregnant with twins. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is starting to be a wonderful story. Yeah, still working, still helping take care of mom with my dad, and had gone on a business trip. And while I was on my business trip, they were having meetings. I was the only woman in the meeting.
Oh, isn't that hard?
In a room full of men. And this was at the headquarters of our company and very important meeting. But I had had a miscarriage in the restroom. And so I had to gather myself and go into this meeting, miscarrying. I didn't know if it was one or two of the babies. And when the meeting was over, I looked at my manager and I said, I need to get to a hospital. I think I'm having a miscarriage. So they took me to the hospital and they kept me monitored for hours. The lady told me, she said, I'm not supposed to say anything to you. You have definitely lost one of the twins, but the other one, the heart is beating very strong. She said, I just wanted to give you some encouragement.
This was one of the nurses?
This was one of the nurses. So I came out of the hospital knowing that I had lost one and that the other baby was there and the heartbeat was strong. So outside of that, the pregnancy was a relatively good pregnancy. Now, they did a lot of monitoring of her, of course, maybe because of the other twin. And they kept saying, we don't want you to have any contractions. Oh, this is going to be a wonderful pregnancy. Didn't gain any weight, no contractions. I love being pregnant.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know is that I had a condition, two conditions. One was vasa previa and the other one was placenta previa.
What's that?
So vasa previa is like where the veins are growing on the outside of the placenta.
Oh.
And so there's like a high risk that your child could be stillborn if you have a contraction because it could sever the veins and immediately you'd bleed out and the baby would not make it. I didn't know I had this condition. They were doing extra testing and monitoring. Of course, I was a mother of advanced maternal age, and so they were monitoring. But I didn't know I had this condition that 1% of the population gets. They were mentioning that they were concerned about the placenta. They weren't using the terms. They were being vague and just saying, we don't want you under any stress. We don't want you to have any contractions. We're going to deliver your child at 36 weeks.
Okay.
I delivered at 36 weeks and had my daughter, Riel, the day before my 37th birthday.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was exactly like he said. It was like my birthday.
Like your birthday.
Yeah.
I love it. You know, I had my daughter 2 days before my 37th birthday.
Wow.
I did. And they did not say I was advanced maternal age. Yeah. They told me I was in geriatric pregnancy. I didn't get that niceness.
Yeah. But it's exactly what he said. He did give me a new beginning. And it was like it was my birthday, just like he said. Now, the trial to get to it wasn't easy, but it was worth everything. If it had not been for God, I wouldn't be here today telling the story about being a mother. Well, let me just say, before I got pregnant, there was a good friend of mine that she found out she was pregnant. And a part of me was like, oh man, I want this for me. But you know what? I decided to be happy for her.
Yeah.
I mean, all of her cravings. We ate ice cream. We had brownie fudge sundaes. We had plantas. We had all kind of different foods. And we go on walks for lunch breaks. I feel like God gives us an opportunity to help undergird someone that has something that maybe we want in order for two things. First, so that we can get firsthand experience to see how it is to be a mom, to go through pregnancy. It's like being an intern.
Yeah.
You get a chance to have on-the-job experience, but then it also qualifies you to have what you say that you want, you know? And if you can believe for someone else, then you have that same opportunity to believe God for something that you want. In the same kind, I feel like being there and believing God for my mother and the miracles that he did for her qualified me to understand what it meant to turn the focus in my direction and now have to believe God for me.
Absolutely.
It's one thing to believe for somebody else, but what happens when you have to believe God for yourself? For yourself. And so I got a lot of experience through those two things. And it produced a miracle.
Yeah.
It produced a miracle.
So beautiful. And I also think it's important to practice love and compassion when someone has what you want.
Yeah.
I really feel like that's a test of the spirit.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so underrated and people don't consider that enough. Just because you didn't get what you wanted from the Lord at that time, it doesn't mean that you can't still be there and be happy for someone else who has it.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that's an incredible lesson that I think too many people miss. It doesn't mean it won't be hard, but it's possible.
Absolutely. Or if the timing or if the situation or the circumstances are not the same, but to be able to believe God for someone else, for their healing, for their hope, for their joy, to celebrate them is important.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Oh, Philisha, what an incredible journey. So you wake up on your birthday, and at this point, you've had your baby girl. She's in your hands. How do you feel?
It was surreal. Even getting to the hospital to have her, my husband's there, his family's there, my dad's there. They're excited. I'm thinking to myself, now I felt the baby kick and I've seen the baby on the sonogram, but I thought, what if there's no baby in my stomach? Like I'd never experienced this and everybody's so excited, but I've been so disappointed. But holding her for the first time, it was surreal.
What state was your mom in at that point? Did she know that you were expecting?
I went to the hospital, if not every day, every other day. I spent all weekend with her. Now she was minimally conscious. So I could come in the room. And by that point, she'd come out of a coma.
Okay.
Her body started to move. If I come in the room, she'd turn her head. And I would read stories to her. I'd comb her hair. I'd give her baths. By that time, she was at a nursing facility close to my house. And the nurses knew that I was very close to my mom and getting ready to have the baby. And I told them to take care of her. But they let me go home early. And the first thing I did was take her to the nursing facility where my mom was. And I placed her in her arms. And I told her, here's the baby that you prayed for. And then I told her, don't you drop my baby. It was very, very special.
Wow.
It was very special. By that December, before her first birthday, my mom transitioned.
But she got to hold your daughter in her arm.
She did.
At this point in your life, you have your daughter, you have your family, your mom has passed away. You mentioned you had all these additional embryos. Do you have any plans for those embryos?
Yeah, so that's where the story gets interesting. We still have hope, although my body is saying otherwise, that there's another child for me. My body is also wanting to transition into a different phase of life. And that's a reality that I'm having to come to terms with. Got these embryos. We tried again. No baby. We tried again. No baby. I've had multiple fibroid surgeries. There's been scarring. What they've said is that I wouldn't have a viable pregnancy. And so my option at this point is surrogacy. And so that's where my hope is at this point. And that's what I love about God is that he has given us multiple avenues to start a family. If it is through adoption, I think about the story of Moses and how the mother knew that if I leave him, he could die. You know, we're killing firstborns. Put him in the river and send him to his purpose. If that's the way you have to get your child, do what you have to do to get your child. If you have to pray like Hannah prayed, get your baby. If you have to believe like Sarah in your old age, and maybe that's where I'm at. So believe like Sarah in your old age to get your child, get your child. If God has to do a miracle like he did with Mary, God revealed that to me, that was the first case of IVF in surrogacy where he placed Jesus into her womb and she conceived and had Jesus, grew him, nurtured him, delivered him to the world. That's the route that I had to go to get my baby. Whatever you have to do to get your child, there is a pathway that has been made available through his word and also through his way. So I'm just grateful to God that regardless of what the doctors have said or say, God has the final say.
Always.
So now I'm in another faith fight and journey for my next child. And this next child, if I'm willing to allow God to use this child, God will do great things in the earth through even this child. He needs this seed in order to advance his kingdom. And so I'm willing, and I know God will do.
Yeah, he will. I'm believing it for you. I'm believing it for myself. I mean, just amazing. And yeah, it's a faith fight.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to keep the faith no matter what.
God is good.
Mhm.
And to think of his goodness, I think about being in my mother's hospital room where they said she'd never open her eyes.
Mhm.
And I heard God say, thank me for what I've already done. He wanted me to take my eyes off of the situation and to turn my eyes to him. And when I start thanking him from as far back as I can remember of all the things that he has done, how good he has been, that's when my situation changed. That's when my situation changed. But if you glorify the situation and you amplify the situation, then you're taking your attention off of the God who can do the impossible. And so when I started thinking of him and all the things he had done, and I started touting his resume,
Mhm.
then what is this in front of me?
Right.
What is this in front of me that God can't do? And as I started to do that, I got excited about it.
Right.
And he said, turn and look at your mom. And I looked and her eyes were open. He opened her eyes. Now he could have healed her. He could have did what he did before. She died before.
Mhm.
She came back. But sometimes God has a different decision,
Mhm.
and we have to respect his decision. Let his yes be yes and his no be no. But I did learn about him through that situation. He left her here for me to see uphand his goodness and his mercy in a situation that looked terrible.
Mhm.
And he did impossible things to let me know that he could do the impossible even with me.
Do you think you would have had the same strength to believe if you had not have gone through all that you went through
No.
with your mother?
Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Because in the beginning of my mother's journey, that was what was being questioned, was my faith. Until your faith is tested,
Mhm.
do you really understand if you have it or not?
The disciples that followed him everywhere and
Yes.
saw his miracles, they still were uncertain, even when he came back. But they did have faith.
They did have
because
faith.
he said, go here, meet me here, and this is where I will be. They had enough faith to go there.
Yes.
And sometimes that's a part of it. You got to make your way to where he's telling you to go, and then he will meet.
He will meet you there. He met me in the hospital room. He met me on the floor crying, wanting to have a child. And I'm grateful to him for meeting me on this journey.
Well, I'm grateful to you, Philisha. What an incredible journey. To see your light, to see how you treat people. No one would know that you've gone through all that you've gone through. So I am just so grateful to you. I appreciate that God allowed me to cross your path. You are just such an incredible woman and such an encouragement to my soul. And I thank you for taking the time to be a guest on the Bernitha Rena Relates podcast.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me share my story. I hope that it inspires another woman to have faith to believe.
Philisha's journey reminds me that faith doesn't mean the road's going to be easy. Trust is required for every twist and turn in the road. Her perseverance is proof that when a promise is made, faith will make a way. So no matter what season you're in, hold on to hope. You never know, your breakthrough could be just one step away. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Bernitha Rena Relates and Facebook at Bernitha Rena Relates. And of course, like, subscribe, and share this podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast. Thanks for listening. I love you for it. We'll talk soon.
What's been done is done again. Same old story, different pen. Yeah. We love, we make mistakes, trying to learn from what life takes. We love, we make mistakes, trying to learn from what life takes. Let's contemplate